This is a story about seasons, not just the ones outside your window, but the ones that live quietly inside you. It's a story about grey days and sudden light, about waiting, about the parts of us that go still in order to survive, and about what happens when something small, like a breath, a bud, a moment of attention, begins to shift everything. Right now, where I live, winter is slowly giving way to spring. Most of the days, there are grey clouds looming in the sky and a steady pitter-patter of rain. The eternal grey reflects my mood until the sun decides to grace us with her warmth. And that's the thing about the shift in the seasons. Where once all we saw was a muted color palette, suddenly there is this bright burst of sunlight. It feels intense because we've endured several cold months and gloomy days. It's almost like the sun is telling us, don't forget, I'm still here. Then there are the bulbs. First, there are dainty snowdrops and small but mighty irises. Then the fun-loving crocus in various shades joins the party before daffodils make their grand appearance as though they are the official announcers of spring. But these bulbs are not large and loud. Strengthened by numbers, you might only notice them if they're in a big group. But I've been enjoying spotting the first bloomers. Observing their tiny petals brings more presence into my life. And I realize how transitions, like the shift in the seasons, consist of small tiny changes that are temporary and unnoticed. Like the bulbs, they only last for a few weeks, and a change in temperature like cold snaps could affect their growth. Their visiting beauty is brief, much like the sun visiting intermittently amongst the grey winter days. It takes presence to notice and appreciate them. Blink and we might miss it. Talk too much and we might fail to honor their presence. Travel too quickly in our minds and bodies, and we might forget about them altogether. Good morning. So I am back in the studio after about 1.5 weeks of having a break. And it was a very good reason to have a break because I was getting married. And I've had a really good time just being able to relax and celebrate with my now husband and his family and my family. Currently, I feel like I'm very happy with the way my life is structured and the life that I'm leading at the moment. So whenever I used to have a break in my regular 9 to 5 job in my profession as a landscape architect, this, old phrase of back to reality would hit me like really hard. And I would feel, I think, the same as everybody else who is working for someone else. There is this sense of, there are going to be so much like emails and queries and so many things that are waiting for me. It can be very rewarding, and it is very rewarding. Right now, this phrase, back to reality, doesn't feel like a very negative connotation anymore. I very much look forward to coming back to the studio, and I found myself, and I can feel it even now, like my heart is palpitating because I'm excited. And I've got a couple of painting goals and sketching goals that I've set up for the next few weeks that I am very much looking forward to starting. So I'm going to take you along with me on this week, where I will finally be learning how to sketch and paint a flower. So this week is going to be an art vlog about learning the basics of sketching a flower. And then the next art vlog is going to be actually me painting a flower. And I want to show you this one particular painting that I did last year. Hold on. So I don't know if you can see this painting. You definitely can. So this is a painting that I did sometime last year when I moved from learning oil painting to learning mixed media. And this was the first ever painting that I did, learning to basically create a painting without using the reference source that the mentors of the art program have given us. So this is what I came up with. And at first I looked at this painting shortly after it was done and I thought, gosh, everything looks like it's tight. You've got these flowers and the deer that are sort of right in the middle with no space to breathe. And, even though I love the clouds and the mountains in the back, I just feel like it could have been executed better. So with the flower in this particular painting, I pretty much made it up. As in, I just sort of looked at the reference photo and tried to replicate it with my own interpretation. This week, I actually want to learn how to sketch the different components of a flower properly, because just like learning how to paint a portrait, when I first learned to sketch and paint portraits, I learned about composition and the distances between the eyes to the nose to the mouth, where the ears should be, where the dimensions are on a face. And I think, to me personally, a flower is similar to learning how to sketch portraits. It has its own components. I don't think a flower is as sort of fixed as, having two eyes, a nose, and a mouth on a face. I think flowers are much more organic. And there is definitely much higher room for interpretation. But at the same time, I would like to actually go back to the basics and learn it so that, I have the ability to sketch them properly. The reason why I'm also doing it is because I think that I love flowers, and I think that perhaps in my future paintings, I will also be incorporating some kind of flowers in the paintings. Who knows? But the main thing is that I'm excited to draw it, I'm excited to paint it, and I'm excited to learn it. I'm gonna welcome myself back to the studio after my gym session, which I'm currently about to go to right now. So stay tuned. When I notice nature, when I notice my breath, when I try to be present to a singular moment and cultivate silence, all my worries fall away. Try to notice your breath right now, in this very moment. Notice how the air briefly touches a part of your nostril as it enters and leaves your body. Isn't this experience alone such a miracle? In a singular experience felt with utmost attention, there is a whole universe. When I meditate, I find myself in a particular kind of experience. It's more like a feeling, sitting still, with no one but myself, no distraction but the chatter of my mind. I find myself in a noisy world that I have created. In there exist a ton of ideas, expectations, people, and experiences split into different categories. My own life being read out loud to me like a novel already having been written when it's still unfolding. Have you ever noticed this part of your mind that always wants certainty? That this part of us, so impatient to allow things to unfold, resists the miracle of life and the miracle of time itself. This monkey mind, as we call it, wants to keep us safe, but it only ends up inhibiting us towards spontaneous joy and loving acceptance. Just a little bit of a recap on my experience so far in sketching this flower. And now that I'm actually doing the sketch, it actually very much reminds me of drawing a face. When you look at a face just plainly by itself, then you don't really spot the sort of different planes and dimensions that exist where, you have like a cheekbone that is going in this direction and then the jaw that is going in this direction. And what I'm learning is drawing a flower is actually also a very similar thing. So when you first look at a flower from the get-go, it looks like it's a round shape, but actually a flower is made up of different rectangular shapes put together to create these different sort of like curves that actually forms the three-dimensional aspect of a flower. So I just got stuck in there, and the thing about me is I can be very, very like hard on when I press the graphite onto paper. So really, I would have liked this sketch to be a little bit more softer and a little bit more faint, but I think part of me also wanted to make sure that this sketch showed up on camera. But also another part of me was trying to concentrate on these little sort of rectangular shapes that make up the whole flower. And just like any new thing that I do, honestly, when I do it, there is this like stage in the process where I literally feel like I am really bad at it. And I think to myself, like, seriously, when you should just give up because this isn't going to look right. It isn't looking right. The proportions are way off. But then I always find that after the end of the sketch and I step back, like with this flower, for example, I just sort of, got up to drink some water and I took a step back from the sketch once it was done. And I looked at it and I realized, oh, it does look like a flower. Oh, the dimensions and the proportions are not too bad. When I'm trying to observe these really tiny aspects of this form, then it seems like I'm way off course. But actually, when I take a step back, I realize that the whole picture is starting to make sense. And I think that that is also a part of life lesson in itself. Like, when you have those moments where you are so like into the details, into the deep parts of a process, whatever you're doing, and you are trying to figure out, the little nuances that make up the project, and everything is well thought out. Sometimes when we look at things too closely, it feels like it may not pull together or it may not make sense. But actually, I think every now and then it's good to just take a step back. Taking a step back makes me realize that it is coming together. When you do take a step back, sometimes you see bits of a project or a sketch that you haven't really seen before, and that adds to the overall process. So, yeah, this is actually my life lesson that I gathered in sketching this flower, and now I'm going to start adding the tones, and that in itself I'm learning is also a part of the skill. And to be honest with you, I remember when I first started to make these sketches for portraits, the first sort of like 3-4 portraits that I did with charcoal didn't look as good and as well developed as the ones I did later. And who knows, maybe this will be a similar case, but if it looks like a flower, then I'm happy with this. The main thing for me right now is just to learn the basics. Learning the basics of how to sketch the form of a flower, and learning the basics of how to also add tones. So without further ado, let's get into the next part of the process. As we slowly enter spring, some days the weather seems miserable. Other days, with visits from the sun, everything feels possible again, alive again. These small experiences of spring and the feeling of renewal it brings is making me think about new beginnings and changes in identity. Is there a part of you that has frozen, like a lake sealed over in January? It is silent, appearing solid and unmoving. Winter has a way of convincing us that what is paused is permanent, that the bare trees are dead, that the cold is proof of failure, that because nothing is blooming, nothing is becoming. Maybe there are parts of you that learned to harden, to go quiet, to conserve energy. Parts of you that have learned certain coping skills or told stories about yourself to survive. But these parts, like the frozen lake, is only still on the surface. Winter is not dead. It is preservation and protection. We all have seasons where roots grow stubborn and deep, where the soil gathers its own form of strength in the dark. I find it to be a miracle that in a singular moment of attention to our breath, we can really see that beneath it all, life is waiting. In spring, the frost begins to loosen its grip, and the smallest thaw, the smallest growth of buds on the trees feel radical. I find it to be a reminder, a powerful reminder, that like the seasons, our identities, our stories, the versions of us that we think cannot be healed or accepted, or simply change in the best ways, can indeed soften, can shift, can surprise us. In meditation, the attention of my breath makes me realize that none of the things that I thought were important really matters at all. But it takes practice to carry the insights we found in stillness to our day-to-day life. Like the long stretch of winter loosening its grip, this is not an overnight miracle. Have you noticed how, during the seasonal shifts, the weather becomes more volatile? The wind claws at branches. Sleet appears where there should have been sun, as if the earth itself resists the thaw. The psyche is no different. When old identities begin to crack, they do not dissolve politely. They protest, they tighten, they throw little storms. When long-held stories about who we are start to crack, there is a tightening. It takes one small noticing of the breath, one small dismantling of identities and stories, one small acceptance of our belonging, and a huge cultivation of patience and acceptance for our awkward selves as our chapter begins to rewrite. The mind builds identities like winter builds ice, layer by layer, convincing us that it is solid truth. But attention, like the sun, is warmth, and warmth reveals movement beneath what looks fixed. The frozen lake was never truly lifeless, and with full presence, I find it very freeing that there exists a special place within me, within us, as real as the seasons, where everything is still possible. So if something in you has frozen, and the arrival of spring has awakened possibilities, ways of living and shifts in identity within you, let them thaw. Even if it feels slow, even if it feels uncomfortable, even if it asks more of your patience than you expected. The ground remembers how to soften, and so do you.
There's a new day that will come again tomorrow. There's a new day to wash away the pain. There's a new day to take away your sorrow, and the old ways get washed out by the rain. Darling, you've got to keep holding on through the night, 'cause I promise you this: if you try to get some sleep, if you give up the fight, if only just for a bit, get you through your struggles. I will always think of you and me. Darling, you've got to keep holding on through the night, 'cause I promise you this: if you try to get some sleep, if you give up the fight, if only just for a bit, there's a new day. It is waiting for us. There's a new day waiting round the bend. There's a new day, and it will restore us. There'll be new ways. This is not the end.
I'm hushing the dog on the chain. I'm lining up stones on the edge of the bank. Rally the troops for another refrain. I sing this softly to myself. I sing this softly